The unseen war, the artists who fought Hitler with inflatable tanks. Imagine the impossible, a U.S. Army unit whose primary weapons were rubber, canvas, paint, and sound effects. 1,000 men, most of them art students, architects, and set designers, who were sworn to a top-secret mission to save lives, not by taking them, but by lying, on a massive theatrical scale. Their battlefield was the enemy's mind. For half a century, their story was classified as a secret so profound that even their families never knew the truth. This is the astonishing, true history of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, the Ghost Army, the creative unit that deceived Hitler's forces across Europe and redefined the meaning of courage in World War II. Part 1. The Genesis of Illusion. The year was 1944. The brutal slog through Italy and the imminent, high-stakes invasion of France had made one thing clear to Allied command. Every advantage, no matter how unconventional, was necessary to break the German grip on Europe. The cost of head-on combat was measured in American blood, and the generals were desperate for an edge. The concept was simple in theory, but revolutionary in practice. What if the Allies could pretend to be somewhere they weren't, or pretend to be stronger than they actually were? The German military machine, while under siege, was still formidable, relying heavily on meticulous intelligence and aerial reconnaissance. The answer to this problem, American military planners Colonel Billy Harris and Major Ralph Ingersoll determined, was a tactical deception unit. They needed men who understood how reality was perceived and, more importantly, how it could be fabricated. They didn't want ordinary soldiers. They wanted artists, engineers, radio operators, and actors, the masters of illusion. The call went out often to art schools, advertising agencies, and draft boards, searching for men with a specific blend of technical skill and creative thinking. Many of these recruits, drafted out of their lives in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, thought they were headed for a dreary tour in a traditional military engineering or communications unit. They had no idea they were about to become part of the most bizarre and brilliant combat unit in U.S. Army history. The unit was officially designated the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Its authorized strength was small, a mere 82 officers and 1,023 enlisted men, but its mission was immense: to simulate the presence of two entire American divisions, roughly 30,000 troops, at critical points along the Western Front. The men were an eclectic mix. Among them were future legends of American culture, fashion designer Bill Blass, who would later dominate 7th Avenue, abstract expressionist painter Ellsworth Kelly, whose stark, vibrant canvases would define modern art, and photographer Art Kane, whose iconic images would capture the soul of the Jazz Age. These were the men who, instead of wielding rifles in a trench, would be wielding air pumps, paintbrushes, and tape recorders. Their training grounds were a far cry from the beaches of Normandy or the forests of the Ardennes. They trained first at Camp Forest in Tennessee, and then at a secluded estate near London. Here, in secret, they learned to wage war with 4 distinct yet coordinated forms of deception. 1. Visual deception, the 603rd Camouflage Engineers. This was the theatrical element, the stagecraft of war. Their props were the inflatable tanks, trucks, artillery, and jeeps. Made of rubber and canvas, these decoys could be inflated with an air compressor in minutes and were convincing from an aerial perspective. A Sherman tank decoy, weighing barely 90 pounds, could be moved and positioned by 2 men, yet looked utterly real from 5,000 feet. The men learned to set up vast fake motor pools, bivouacs complete with carefully placed laundry hanging on lines, and artillery batteries where the earth was strategically disturbed to simulate the recoil of firing guns.
The art was in the imperfect camouflage. The decoys had to be visible just enough to be convincing to German reconnaissance planes. 2. Sonic deception, the 3132 Signal Service Special. If the visual deceptions were the scenery, the sonic effects were the sound of the play. A small team of engineers recorded the authentic sounds of battle, the roar of a full company of tanks moving in convoy, the rumble of truck columns, the voices of thousands of men, and the sound of artillery fire. These recordings were then played back using massive, powerful loudspeakers mounted on half-tracks. A single sound truck, positioned correctly, could project the clamor of a full tank division up to 15 miles away. The unit's sound engineers were careful to use sound appropriate to the situation, whether it was the noise of a night maneuver or the morning clatter of a massive unit waking up. 3. Radio deception. The signal company, known as spoofing, this was arguably the most vital layer of the illusion. Experienced radio operators, using actual divisional call signs and mimicking the unique fist keying style of real operators, would transmit fake messages and chatter that simulated the vast, complex communications of 2 or more divisions. They created a fictional chain of command, issuing fabricated orders, supply requests, and troop movements in coded language. German radio intelligence, the Funkabwehr, would intercept this flood of traffic, meticulously logging the movements of divisions that did not exist, thus locking the enemy's attention onto phantom units. 4. Special effects, the actors and engineers. This involved the final, crucial layer of human performance. Ghost Army personnel, including officers wearing the insignia of the fictional division they were simulating, would mingle in local French towns, casually discussing future operations, asking for directions to fictional headquarters, or just making their presence known in bars and cafes. They were masters of troop leakage, deliberately planting misinformation in front of German spies and local sympathizers. They even traveled in convoys of just a few real tanks, driving them in a loop to create the illusion of endless lines of armor. By May 1944, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops were ready. They packed their inflatable arsenal, their sound equipment, and their secret scripts and shipped out for Europe, ready to put on the performance of the war. Part 2. The Great Deceptions. The Ghost Army's arrival in France, 2 weeks after D-Day, immediately put their skills to the test. They arrived without their inflatable gear, initially serving as a rudimentary security unit and getting their first taste of the reality of combat. But their real mission began soon after. Operation Fortitude, the foundation. Though the 23rd was not the primary deception unit for D-Day, that was a much larger, static effort. Their entire doctrine was an extrapolation of the successful strategic deception known as Operation Fortitude. This massive campaign, preceding the Normandy invasion, had convinced Hitler that the main Allied assault would land at Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. The Ghost Army's mobile tactics were designed to continue this misdirection on a tactical, battle-by-battle level, often focusing on a specific city or river crossing. Operation Brittany, the practice run. The Ghost Army's first significant mission was near Brest, France, in August 1944. The American 83rd Infantry Division was tasked with besieging the heavily fortified German garrison. Fearing the Germans would reinforce their position, the Ghost Army was brought in to create a phony 2nd Division, the 6th Armored, to make the encircling force appear overwhelmingly strong. The team meticulously created a full, fake motor pool using their inflatable vehicles, carefully positioned to look genuine in aerial photos. At night, the sound trucks roared to life, playing the recorded ruckus of tank columns moving into position. The radio operators flooded the airwaves with chatter about the 6th Armored's arrival and readiness for the final assault. The German response was exactly what was hoped for. intercepted communications showed German command reacting to the presence of the 6th Armored. They redeployed a panzer division to counter the non-existent threat, tying up valuable German resources and making the actual assault by the 83rd Division less costly. It was a spectacular success, the first verifiable proof that the combination of visual, sonic, and radio deception worked perfectly on the battlefield. The lull and the artist's life. As the war progressed, the Ghost Army's artists found a grim inspiration in their surroundings. Between missions, the men, many of whom were professionals in their field, documented the